Introduction. A quiet companion in every room. There are few objects in a room more silent, more steady, or more overlooked than the shelf. It does not move. It does not hum or glow. It does not make a sound or demand attention. And yet, it is almost always there. Above the bed. Beside the door. In the kitchen. In the corner of a shop. In a dusty attic. Or stretched long across the back wall of a public library. The shelf is not exciting. It does not travel, nor change, nor sing. But it holds. It holds quietly. And it has held for thousands of years. Its job has never really changed. To keep things off the ground. To make use of vertical space. To display, to store, to support. Whether it holds a treasured book, a family heirloom, a can of soup, or a forgotten pair of gloves, the shelf does not judge. It merely waits, holding what it is asked to hold. Its history is not dramatic. There are no wars fought over shelves, no revolutions sparked by bracket design. But it is, in its own way, a small story of human progress. As people have built homes, written books, baked bread, stitched clothes, invented technology, and opened shops, the shelf has always been there, somewhere in the background, quietly catching and carrying the bits and pieces of life. From carved stone ledges in Neolithic caves to floating glass panels in modern penthouses, the shelf has followed us. It has changed shape, changed material, and changed place, but its purpose has remained constant. In this sleepy story, we will explore the long, quiet journey of the shelf. We will travel through ages of wood, clay, stone, and steel. We will peer into temples and kitchens, monasteries and megastores. We will drift slowly through centuries of silent support, and discover just how much this simple object is held, not just in weight, but in meaning. So close your eyes gently if you wish, and let us begin the story of the shelf, a quiet companion in every room. Stone ledges and clay niches, shelves in ancient times. Before wood was milled. Before nails were forged. Before bricks were stacked with precision, there was stone. And in that stone, there were hollows. The earliest shelves were not furniture. They were features of the very walls that surrounded people. In ancient caves, archaeologists have discovered simple ledges, often no more than slightly flattened projections of rock. Whether formed naturally or carved with tools made of flint and bone, these stony surfaces served an unmistakable function. They held things. Perhaps a flint blade. Perhaps a small pouch made of hide. Perhaps nothing at all, just waiting to be used. The human desire to lift objects off the ground seems as old as dwellings themselves. Even without separate movable furniture, the instinct to create space above the floor, to store, to protect, or simply to set aside, appears again and again in ancient archaeological sites. As humans began building more permanent shelters, particularly in Mesopotamia and along the Nile, clay became a favored building material. In homes made of mud brick, walls were often shaped by hand. And here too the earliest shelves emerge, as small recessed niches built directly into walls. They were not fancy. They had no brackets or edges. But they had purpose. A small niche might hold an oil lamp, its flame flickering in the darkness. Another might cradle a vessel of water, kept cool within the thick wall. In some homes, these niches were purely practical. In others, they seemed almost ceremonial, places for idols or symbols, perhaps watched over by generations. Even in the stone temples of ancient Egypt, the idea persisted. Bas-reliefs depict offerings placed on narrow stone tables or resting on projecting ledges. These were not shelves in the modern sense. but they were platforms of reverence, surfaces of support, places to set things above the earth. Shelves, even in their infancy, were doing what they have always done: holding things steady, holding things sacred, holding things apart from the chaos of the ground. There is something quiet about that. And so, from carved caves to clay-walled huts, the earliest human shelves began their long history, not as separate objects, but as parts of the walls themselves. Unmoving, simple, stable, and quietly essential. Scrolls and storage, shelving in early civilizations. As human settlements grew into cities, and those cities gave rise to civilizations, something curious began to happen. People started collecting things. They collected food, in clay jars, baskets, and bins. They collected tools, flint blades, bronze chisels, polished stones. They collected records, not just memories, but writings, scratched into clay or inked onto papyrus. And with this new habit of collection came a familiar need: storage. The shelf, still humble and mostly built into walls, began to evolve into something more deliberate. Shelves for scrolls. In the bustling cities of ancient Mesopotamia, Uruk, Nippur, Babylon, clay tablets were everywhere. These tablets carried information, lists of livestock, laws, prayers, trade records, and early stories. They were heavy and fragile. They needed to be stored. In the libraries of these early cities, clay tablets were organized in rows, placed carefully into compartments that resembled the very earliest bookshelves. Some niches were deep, some shallow. Each was crafted with intention. Each was a quiet slot for a silent message. Across the Mediterranean, in ancient Egypt, scribes wrote on scrolls of papyrus. These scrolls needed to be dried, then stored. Temples and record rooms featured low benches and tiered platforms, precursors to what we might call document shelving. It is said that in the Grand Library of Alexandria, scrolls were sorted by subject and stored in pigeonhole-like cubbies, each one labeled, each one a little resting place for knowledge. There the shelf became something more, a tool of memory, a keeper of language, a support for learning. It held not just things, but thoughts. Shelves for storage. Elsewhere in the ancient world, shelves continued to serve practical needs. In Minoan Crete, archaeologists have uncovered large storerooms filled with amphorae and jars. In some, long stone or wooden ledges supported the vessels. These were not decorative. They were solid, purposeful, shelves built for the weight of wine, oil, and grain. In the homes of wealthy Greeks and Romans, shelves were often incorporated into storage rooms and kitchens. Some were built into the plaster walls, while others may have been freestanding, supported by columns or small frames. They bore pottery, utensils, herbs, and scrolls. Always holding, always still. It is here that the shelf began to inch closer to furniture, separate from the wall, transportable, even customized. Still simple, but changing. And so, in the ancient world, the shelf served many roles. It held sacred scrolls, jars of olives, clay figures, and tablets etched with the first known stories. But whether in a temple archive or a kitchen pantry, its purpose was steady. The shelf remained quiet, stable, and reassuring, a gentle support beneath the weight of human culture. Timber and temples. The shelf in classical antiquity. As civilizations grew more refined, so too did the objects they used to organize life. In the classical worlds of Greece and Rome, the shelf began to transition from a passive feature of architecture to a crafted item. Furniture, in its early and practical form. The people of the Mediterranean were surrounded by materials that encouraged this shift. Stone was abundant, yes, but it was wood, particularly timber from olive, cypress, and cedar trees, that gave the shelf a new character. It made the shelf more adaptable, more mobile, more varied in design. Stikje. Still overlooked, but now gently refined. Shelves in temples and philosophical spaces. In Greek temples, shelves were often used to hold ritual objects, small statues, bowls, votive offerings. These were not loud items. They did not cry out for attention, but they were symbols of devotion. Carefully placed, carefully kept. Some temple interiors contained wooden beams and ledges, often painted or carved. Upon these, items of spiritual importance would rest. Shelves supported incense burners, oil flasks, small marble figurines, the tools and tokens of worship. In the later Hellenistic world, philosophical schools flourished. These places valued the written word, the preserved thought. Scrolls filled quiet study rooms. And shelves, still simple, mostly wall-mounted or built as cubby-like cabinets, became keepers of wisdom. There are fragments of writing that mention scroll racks and shelving in these schools. Narrow wooden planks, supported by brackets or wooden pegs, formed rows and stacks. No one described them in detail. Why would they? The shelf simply was. It served. It held. And then it was forgotten, while minds wandered toward higher thoughts. Roman refinement and domestic use. The Romans, as they often did, expanded upon Greek ideas and added structure. Their homes, especially those of the wealthy, were filled with objects. Statues, bowls, scrolls, cups, coins, relics, tools, perfumes. Items needed places. And shelves answered. In Roman villas, shelves took on variety. Some were carved into alcoves. Others were freestanding, made of wood or stone, and placed within cupboards or armaria. These were early cabinets, and their interiors sometimes contained horizontal slats, the first step toward the modern bookshelf. In Roman kitchens and baths, wall-mounted wooden shelves held jugs, soaps, herbs, and spices. In studies and offices, shelves were paired with chests and writing tables. Some were even adorned with small decorative elements, dentils, scrolls, or painted patterns. It's easy to overlook the shelf in these settings. Among the marble columns and mosaic floors, who would pause to admire a plank of timber nailed into a wall. And yet, it was there. Always present. Always useful. Always ready to hold whatever needed to be lifted up, and gently kept in place. Monasteries and manuscripts. Medieval wall shelves. When the lights of the classical world dimmed and the medieval centuries unfolded, life slowed. Much of Europe became quieter, simpler, more inward-looking. But in this new, slower rhythm, the shelf remained, now retreating into the stone corridors of monasteries and the wooden walls of manor kitchens. The great libraries of Greece and Rome were gone or scattered. The scrolls and tablets of antiquity faded from daily use. But in quiet rooms behind monastery walls, knowledge continued its soft survival, letter by letter, line by line. And the shelf became its humble guardian. Shelves in the scriptorium. In monasteries, the scriptorium was a place of quiet labor. Here, monks sat at wooden desks copying texts by hand, Latin prayers, medical treatises, biblical verses. Each word was written carefully. The task could take months, even years. Nearby, against the cold stone walls, were shelves. sometimes just wooden planks hammered into brackets, sometimes niches carved directly into the stone. Upon these rested precious items, pots of ink, parchment rolls, wax tablets, and finished manuscripts. These shelves were not wide, nor numerous. Books were rare, heavy, and precious. They were often chained to reading tables rather than stacked in shelves as we do today. But still, even a single flat board, with 2 candles and a psalter resting on it, played a quiet role. In these spaces, the shelf was not decorative. It was functional, steady, and somber. It bore the weight of devotion and knowledge. Its stillness mirrored the silent discipline of the monks. Shelves in the kitchen and storeroom. Elsewhere in the monastery, the shelf took on other tasks. In the kitchen, simple wooden boards were nailed to beams. Upon them sat bread loaves, jugs of beer, dried herbs, and cheeses wrapped in cloth. These shelves were built by hand, often from rough pine or oak. Their surfaces were uneven, their nails hand-forged. In pantries and storerooms, stronger shelves were used to support heavy sacks or barrels. They were sometimes arranged in rows, forming what we might now recognize as the beginnings of proper shelving units. But they had no polish, no paint, no decoration, just function.
Qui est répétitive fonction.
Shelves held the physical tools of monastic life, from candles to cauldrons. They sat in shadows and supported the slow work of faith and survival. Shelves in the monastic cell. In the cells where monks lived and prayed, a single shelf might hang above a bed of straw. Perhaps it held a wooden cross. Perhaps a small icon. Perhaps a cup and nothing more. That small surface, a few inches deep, made by hand, hung with twine or wedged into a stone crevice, offered a private place.
À place tout cette something down. À l'edge for stillness.
And so, through the long centuries of the Middle Ages, the shelf remained. Not in the halls of kings or the parlors of nobles, but in the quiet spaces of discipline, devotion, and domestic labor. It was never praised.
Never gilded.
Never given a name. It simply did what it always had. It held what needed holding. Cabinets and cupboards, Renaissance and early modern shelving. As Europe awoke from the long quiet of the Middle Ages, light began to return, softly at first, then with clarity.
Art blossomed.
Books multiplied. Trade grew. And with these changes came a transformation in how people stored their possessions. The shelf, once a passive ledge or humble board, began to evolve into something more complex. It was no longer only a part of the wall, or a bare support above the hearth. It became part of furniture, joined, enclosed, decorated. The shelf acquired doors and names. Now, it was sometimes called a cabinet, or a cupboard, or an armoire. But beneath those names, its function remained the same: to hold things. Neatly, silently, dependably. Shelves in the Renaissance home. In Renaissance Italy and the Low Countries, households grew more refined. Wealth increased. So did the number of objects within the home: books, painted panels, combs, jars, spices, keys, rosaries, coins. These possessions needed to be stored and protected. The solution? Furniture with internal shelving. Cabinets with doors and drawers began to appear in homes. Their insides featured narrow wooden shelves, adjusted to fit books, bottles, and trinkets. These shelves were often fixed, but occasionally they could be moved, a small innovation that added versatility. No longer was the shelf just a board on a wall. Now it was a protected interior, a hidden space behind wood, iron hinges, and tiny locks. In wealthier homes, these pieces became ornate. Oak or walnut cabinets were carved with floral designs or religious figures. Shelves inside were polished and measured carefully. And yet, even amid the flourish of artistry, the shelf remained modest. It was not the star. It was the steady stagehand, working behind the curtain. Bookshelves in the study. The Renaissance also brought a revolution in printing. Gutenberg's press, born in the mid-15th century, slowly gave rise to an abundance of books. Not hundreds, but thousands. Even tens of thousands. Books no longer needed to be copied by hand. They could be printed, sold, collected. And as books entered homes and institutions, they needed to be stored. The bookshelf, simple, vertical, and open-faced, entered its true form. Some were built into the walls of studies. Others were standalone pieces, tall, rectangular, with evenly spaced horizontal boards. These shelves were practical, measured to match the size of folios or quartos. Some had ledges to stop books from falling. Others were open from all sides. They didn't yet dominate a room as they might today. But they were there, quietly multiplying. In the homes of scholars and merchants, the shelf became a familiar sight. It no longer held only candles or scrolls, but a growing world of print, grammar books, herbal guides, atlases, and almanacs. And still, the shelf asked for no praise. It stood. It waited. It held. Cupboards in the kitchen. In kitchens, shelves evolved too. The cupboard, a board for cups, became a distinct piece of furniture. Sometimes open-faced, sometimes with doors, it was a structure made to hold dishes, pitchers, and food. In rural homes, cupboards were simple, rough boards stacked vertically. In urban houses, they became more decorative, with scalloped edges, turned legs, and painted panels. Still, the interior remained quiet, just a few shelves. Plain, useful, and unchanged. The rise of the bookcase, Enlightenment and literacy. By the 17th and 18th centuries, a quiet transformation had taken root in homes, studies, and libraries across Europe. People were reading more. Not just clergy, not just nobles, but tradesmen, artisans, women, and even some children. With the spread of printing, and the slow but steady rise in literacy, books no longer belonged only to the elite. They were multiplying, filling homes, filling minds. And so, the shelf had to grow. It became taller. It became wider. It became a bookcase. No longer just a few planks mounted to a wall or enclosed within a cupboard, the bookcase emerged as a new form of furniture, dedicated entirely to holding books, row upon row, upright, side by side. This quiet development marked a turning point in the shelf's long journey. For the first time, the shelf was not just a hidden support. It was becoming visible, even central.
The private library and the home bookcase.
In Enlightenment-era homes, personal libraries became more common. For those who could afford them, these rooms were lined with wooden bookcases, built tall, sometimes to the ceiling. Oak, walnut, or pine planks formed neat rows, evenly spaced to fit volumes of various sizes. Some bookcases had glass doors, to protect books from dust and moisture. Others remained open, allowing easy access and the simple pleasure of seeing a wall of leather spines. Bookcases were often arranged along the walls of a study, or placed in drawing rooms, parlors, and hallways. And within them, lined up quietly, were the texts of an age fascinated by reason, nature, mathematics, and the human condition. The shelf was no longer simply a practical surface. It had become an instrument of intellectual order.
A Visual Library. A silent witness to the rise of the self-taught reader.
Classical building public libraries and shelving design. As cities grew, so did the idea of the public library. In London, Paris, and Amsterdam, reading societies and lending libraries began to appear. Universities expanded their collections. And wherever books gathered, shelves followed. Library shelving became a matter of thought and planning. How should the books be arranged? How tall should the shelves be? Should they be fixed or adjustable? In many early libraries, books were stored with their spines inward, titles written along the edges of the pages. Later, spines were turned outward, and shelving was built accordingly. Some libraries adopted laddered shelving, where high walls were covered in shelves and accessed by rolling ladders. Others created alcove designs, with bays of shelving between structural columns. All of it, shelves. Miles and miles of quiet, sturdy shelves. And yet, as their height and number grew, their personality did not. A shelf, even in the grandest library, remained modest. It carried the weight of knowledge without complaint. It never asked for attention, even as it held whole worlds between two covers. Industrial efficiency, shelving in the 19th century.
The 19th century ushered in a new rhythm to life. Loudé, fasté, more mechanical.
Factories hummed. Railways stretched across continents. Cities swelled with workers, soot, and progress. Amid all this movement, the shelf endured. But it too changed, subtly practically, adapting to the needs of industry, storage, and scale. The age of individual craftsmanship was slowly giving way to mass production. And shelves, once handmade from oak or pine in a local carpenter shop, began to roll out of factories by the dozens, uniform, efficient, and unadorned. The shelf of the 19th century was no longer only in homes or monasteries. It was in warehouses, offices, factories, and shops. It became systematic.
Modular. Industrial.
Factory shelving in the factory and warehouse. Factories required order. Parts, tools, materials, products, all needed to be stored and retrieved with minimal fuss. Open shelving systems, often made of iron, steel, or basic timber, were installed in rows along walls or built into the structure itself. These shelves had no decoration, no carving, no character, but they had strength. Some were adjustable, allowing workers to move the shelves up or down depending on the height of the item. Others were fixed. They held boxes of rivets, crates of shoes, bundles of cloth, or tins of oil. In warehouses, the scale expanded. Shelving stretched high, forming tall corridors. Sometimes, catwalks were built to allow access to upper levels. Aisles and bins were numbered. The shelf became part of a system, part of logistics, part of quiet order behind the noise of industry. It was never seen by the public. It was not intended to be beautiful, but it was necessary, deeply necessary. Filing and the office shelf. The 19th century also saw a boom in bureaucracy. With the rise of companies, legal systems, and state institutions, came a flood of paperwork. And paperwork, too, needed shelves. Office shelving was designed to store ledgers, account books, and eventually, file boxes. Some shelves were built into filing cabinets, with metal dividers and pull-out trays. Others formed long wooden rows, stacked with binders and stamped volumes. In banks, insurance firms, rail offices, and courts, the shelf stood quietly behind the desk, never speaking,
never changing, just holding document after document, the growing paper skeleton of the modern world.
Retail shelving and the rise of the shop display. With industrial production came consumer goods, and with goods came shops. Stores in the 19th century became places of display, not just storage. Shelves took on a dual purpose. They held items, but also presented them. In dry goods stores, general shops, apothecaries, and milliners, wooden or glass-fronted shelves lined the walls.
Jar of candy,
Tins of tea, spools of thread, all neatly arranged. These shelves had little flair, but they were inviting. They brought items up to eye level. They turned goods into choices. The shelf, once hidden in the kitchen or chapel, now faced the public. Calm, measured, full. Modern homes, modern needs, 20th century shelves. The 20th century brought electricity, appliances, and mobility into everyday life. But it also brought clutter, gently, steadily, year by year. As homes filled with more books, records, canned goods, souvenirs, and small devices, the humble shelf found itself in increasing demand. No longer just a plank nailed to a wall or a built-in feature, the shelf became furniture, mobile, modular, and mass-produced. Throughout the century, it would follow the rhythms of war and peace, scarcity and surplus, modernism and nostalgia. And through it all, it quietly adapted, always present, always holding. Open shelving in the modern living room. The living rooms of the early 20th century were orderly and modest. Many included a bookcase or two, often in dark wood, often with glass doors. Books stood neatly beside clocks, framed photos, or porcelain animals. By mid-century, the tone changed. The post-war years brought optimism and consumer confidence. With it came new materials, lighter, cheaper, more colorful. Open shelving became fashionable. Low-slung teak units in the 1950s, minimalist modular systems in the 1960s. Shelves were no longer only for books. They held radios, potted plants, albums, and TV guides. They were designed not just to contain, but to frame a lifestyle. Some were part of wall units, towering wooden forms with compartments, cabinets, and cubbies. Others were standalone, a ladder shelf, a cube shelf, a zigzag shelf. Form followed function, but design quietly crept in. Yet beneath every bold line and modern veneer, the shelf remained unchanged. Still a flat surface. Still quietly bearing weight. Kitchen shelves and the rise of built-ins. In the kitchen, the 20th century saw the shelf become deeply integrated. No longer rough planks hung by nails. Modern kitchen shelving was now part of fitted cabinetry. Clean, geometric, efficient. Open shelves appeared above counters, holding spices, mugs, or recipe books. Pantry shelves became deeper, wider, and more standardized, holding tins, boxes, and jars in tidy rows. Metal brackets replaced wooden pegs. Plastic liners protected painted boards. The shelf became almost invisible, folded into the architecture of the room. But its quiet function remained, a simple flat place to keep things up and out of the way. The personal bookcase and DIY shelving. As the century progressed, books became even more accessible. Book clubs mailed paperbacks by the dozen. University students stacked textbooks in small dorm rooms. And the bookcase, tall, affordable, and easy to assemble, became a common sight. From mass-market pine shelves in the 1970s to sleek IKEA kits in the 1980s and 90s, the shelf was democratized. Anyone could own one. Anyone could build one. Anyone could fill one. And so people did. Shelves in bedrooms. Shelves in bathrooms.
Garage shelves.
Shoe shelves. Toy shelves. Media shelves for VHS tapes, CDs, video games. Shelves in closets. Shelves above toilets. Shelves made of cinder blocks and planks. Shelves became ordinary, ubiquitous, almost unnoticed. But in their quiet way, they supported an increasingly complex domestic world, gently keeping it all in place. Design and utility, contemporary shelving trends. As the 21st century unfolded, the shelf, ever steady, ever useful, found itself once again reshaped by the rhythms of modern life. This time, not by necessity alone, but by a new obsession, design. No longer just a place to store, the shelf became a way to express style, personality, minimalism, nostalgia. It began appearing in magazines, showrooms, and social media posts. It became curated. It became decorative. Yet quietly, it remained what it had always been, a surface that holds. Even in an age of digital clouds and wireless everything, the physical shelf persists, solid, steady material. Floating shelves and minimalist forms. In many contemporary homes, the floating shelf has become a favorite. Stripped of brackets, legs, and visible supports, it hovers against the wall, a plank held up by unseen fasteners. The look is clean, airy, modern. Floating shelves often appear in pairs or triplets. They hold potted succulents, framed photos, candles, or a small stack of books. Some hold nothing at all, their very emptiness a stylistic choice. These shelves are not meant to be hidden. They are meant to be seen, even if what they hold is minimal. They express calm, control, simplicity. And yet, they are still shelves. Just like the ones in monasteries, shops, and scroll rooms. Quietly doing what shelves do. Open storage and industrial reuse. In contrast to floating shelves, another popular trend has embraced raw materials and industrial design.
Exposed metal braquet.
Reclaimed wood.
Piping.
Concrete. These shelves, often found in loft apartments and cafes, harken back to factories and warehouses. They are open, strong, honest in their construction. They hold cookbooks, ceramic mugs, vintage scales, or old radios. Some run the entire length of a wall. Others form asymmetrical grids. This look, at once rugged and curated, is a modern celebration of utility. The shelf, in this setting, becomes both tool and artifact. Still, it is mostly quiet.
Mostly steady.
Mostly taken for granted. Modular systems and customization. Technology has made modular shelving easier than ever. Snap-together units.
Cube system.
Adjustable rods. Brackets that slide and lock. Homeowners can now customize shelving layouts to fit any space. Closets, living rooms, offices, pantries.
Online tools help design everything down to the centimètre.
Companies offer systems with names like Smart Storage and Total Wall Solutions. But in the end, they are just shelves, multiply arranged. They hold shoes, laptops, craft supplies, pots, cleaning products, rows of spice jars, rows of comic books. No matter how modular or modern, their function remains still and small. They hold. They keep. They wait. Aesthetic displays and curated shelving. Shelving today is as much about what it shows as what it stores. Shelf styling or shelfie culture has become a trend of its own. On social platforms, people post pictures of their shelf arrangements, color-coded books, tiny sculptures, trailing plants, stacks of design magazines. Everything positioned just so. In retail stores, stylists use shelves to build miniature worlds, calm, artistic, designed to suggest ease and abundance. And still, through all of this, the shelf does what it always has. It holds, quietly, silently, unaffected by the attention, unchanged in its nature. Materials that hold, from wood to metal to plastic. Behind every shelf, there is a material, silent, sturdy, and chosen with care. Through the long arc of history, humans have shaped whatever they had on hand into something flat and firm enough to hold. In the beginning, it was stone and clay, then wood. Then, slowly, metal joined the craft. In time, glass and plastic followed. And in the modern age, composite boards and laminates appeared, quieter, cheaper, more adaptable. Each of these materials has its own quiet story. And the shelves we see today, in homes, offices, museums, shops, are shaped by their hidden strength. Wood, the ancient constant. Wood has been the most enduring shelf material for thousands of years. Trees are nature's scaffolding, strong, flexible, renewable. From the first timber planks resting on clay walls to ornate walnut library shelves in 18th century studies, wood has offered warmth and structure. Shelves made of oak, pine, teak, or maple still line the walls of modern homes. Wooden bookcases, cupboards, and kitchen shelves remain as common as ever. Some are carved and polished. Others are plain boards on brackets. Wood creaks gently under weight. It expands and contracts with the weather. But it holds, and has always held, with quiet patience. Metal strength in silence. The industrial age brought metal shelving into factories and storerooms. Iron, then steel, then aluminum. These materials allowed for stronger, thinner structures, able to bear far more weight with far less bulk. In warehouses, metal shelves support heavy crates, boxes, and tools. In garages, they hold paint cans, ladders, and bags of soil. In kitchens, stainless steel shelves hold pots and spices in neat, clean lines. Metal doesn't warp with moisture. It doesn't rot. It can gleam or rust or powder coat in any color. But its nature is firm, quietly immovable.
Glace, transparent support.
In the 20th century, glass shelving emerged, often in bathrooms, boutiques, or galleries. Its clarity made it almost invisible, letting light pass through and drawing attention to the objects it supported.
Glass shelves don't shoot. They whisper.
They are chosen for their subtlety, their fragility, their elegance. Tempered for safety, often supported by sleek chrome brackets, glass shelves hold perfumes, sculptures, or folded towels. Always clean. Always composed. They ask not to be touched too much. They reflect softly. They are more display than storage, but they too are shelves. Plastic and composite boards, cheap, changeable, and common. In recent decades, plastic and MDF, medium-density fiberboard, have become the most affordable shelf materials. Lightweight, easily molded and mass-produced, they allow for flexible shapes and endless finishes, faux wood grain, bright colors, matte black. Plastic shelving is found in children's rooms, laundry rooms, student dorms. MDF forms the backbone of countless budget bookcases and wall-mounted cubbies.
These shelves don't last forever.
They sag sooner, but they serve their time well. In their own quiet way, they fulfill their duty, often unnoticed.
Mixte matérial, acquis et collaboration.
Modern shelves often blend materials. Wooden shelves with metal frames, glass resting on chrome, plastic brackets with wire mesh. These combinations allow for flexibility in style, strength, and function. Each part of the shelf has a role to play: the horizontal piece that holds, the vertical piece that braces, the bracket that bears. Together, they create something silent, stable, and useful. No matter the material, the shelf remains the same in spirit. A quiet plane between earth and air, patiently holding whatever we place upon it. Shelves in public spaces, libraries, shops, and museums. Not all shelves live in homes. Many serve the quiet routines of public life, in places built not for private comfort, but for collective purpose. In libraries, shops, museums, and even waiting rooms, shelves form a silent infrastructure, a background rhythm of display, storage, and subtle order. They may go unnoticed, but without them, the contents of civilization would scatter, pile, or disappear into chaos. These are shelves not for beauty or decor, but for service. Library shelves, guardians of the written word. Walk into any library, large or small, and you will find yourself surrounded by shelves. Quiet, uniform, tall or short. They stretch down long aisles. They wrap around walls. They form rows like crops in a field of knowledge. Most are made of metal or wood, with adjustable slots to accommodate books of different sizes. Some libraries use movable compact shelving, rows of shelves that slide on tracks to save space. Others employ open stacks, alcoves, or rolling carts. Though the materials vary, their purpose is constant: to hold, preserve, and make accessible the written word. Each book has its place. Each shelf has its load. And in this quiet order, libraries breathe. Librarians spend quiet hours arranging and rearranging these shelves, cataloging, shifting, shelving returned volumes. Patrons browse them slowly, sometimes aimlessly. And all the while, the shelves stand still, holding decades or even centuries of human thought. Retail shelving, displaying for purchase. Shops and markets use shelves for a different purpose, not storage, but presentation. From grocers to boutiques, from hardware stores to department stores, shelving is a silent salesperson. In grocery aisles, metal shelves hold cans, jars, and boxes, arranged front-facing, symmetrical, and tempting. In fashion stores, floating wooden shelves hold folded sweaters or displays of shoes. In tech shops, glass shelves may display headphones, watches, or phones, each resting in its place like a museum piece. Retail shelves are designed to influence behavior. Their height, lighting, color, and arrangement all work together to catch the eye, suggest abundance, and invite selection. Yet even here, amidst commerce and marketing, the shelf does not speak. It simply offers. It holds without judgment. And when the store closes, it rests, emptied or full, waiting for morning. Museum shelves, holding the past. In the hushed halls of museums, shelving takes on a more reverent role. Behind the scenes, in storage rooms and archives, carefully engineered shelving systems hold artifacts, fossils, paintings, and fragments of history. Some are stored in acid-free boxes. Others rest directly on custom shelves padded with foam or felt. These are conservation shelves, built to protect and preserve. They often roll on tracks or are sealed behind glass. They resist dust, light, temperature shifts. In public galleries, shelving is used sparingly, often as part of a display. A row of antique books. A shelf of labeled bones. A stack of ancient tools. These are shelves for interpretation, not just storage. They hold the visible past in place, so it can be quietly studied, so it will not fall. The shelf in art, culture, and memory. The shelf, so humble, so silent, has also found its way into the realm of symbol and story. It is not just an object of utility, but one that appears in art, literature, and memory. Across generations, it has quietly become a keeper of personal histories, and a metaphor for the mind itself. Though rarely noticed, the shelf holds more than things. It holds meaning. Shelves in paintings and photographs. From still life paintings to modern photography, the shelf often appears as a background element, a quiet participant in the composition. In Dutch still lives of the 17th century, wooden shelves might cradle jars, books, candles, or skulls. They grounded the scene, offering balance to Veneta's themes of mortality and time. In later portraiture, a shelf filled with books or artifacts suggested learning, taste, or status. In photographs, shelves act as character clues. A cluttered shelf may reveal a lifetime of collections. A sparsely filled one may speak of simplicity or transience. Modern art installations have used empty shelves as commentary on memory loss, on cultural erasure, on the passage of time. The shelf becomes a frame for absence. In literature and imagination, writers often describe character shelves to reveal who they are, what they read, what they keep, what they value. Shelves appear in poems, essays, and novels, sometimes directly, sometimes metaphorically. They are compared to memory, to layers of the mind, to quiet stages on which moments of life are placed, waiting to be recalled. A diary on a shelf, a favorite book, a broken clock, all become vessels of emotion, simply by resting on a ledge. Even in childhood tales, magical shelves abound, filled with potions, maps, or curious trinkets that move when no one's looking. The shelf here is not just a surface. It's a threshold to wonder. The shelf as memory. In everyday life, shelves often become accidental time capsules. In a guest room, an old shelf holds dusty photo albums and outdated encyclopedias. In a workshop, it may hold jars of screws, faded labels, or tools no longer used. In a bedroom, a bookshelf becomes a map of someone's reading life, from children's tales to textbooks to well-worn novels. Some people arrange their shelves meticulously. Others let them grow wild, like ivy. Either way, these shelves collect time. They gather fragments of people, of moods, of stages, of selves once lived. In this way, shelves are not merely objects. They are participants in memory. They are quiet listeners. They are frames for the life that passes by them, slowly, gently, 1 year at a time. The digital shelf, virtual spaces that store and display. In the modern world, not all shelves are made of wood or metal. Some cannot be touched. Some have no weight to bear, only data. These are digital shelves, intangible yet structured, invisible yet essential. We find them in online libraries, shopping platforms, mobile devices, and cloud storage systems. They are the next quiet evolution of the shelf, carrying the past forward, without dust or decay. They store, they present, they organize. Much like their physical predecessors, but now in a realm where nothing sits and yet everything rests. Apps, albums, and playlists, the personal digital shelf. Consider your phone, your tablet.
Your streaming service dashboard.
Each is filled with icons, tiles, and folders, all acting like miniature shelves. A folder of photos, digital frames, sorted by date.
A playlist of song, a virtual rack of mood.
A list of apps, tools lined up on an invisible ledge. The grid layout of most devices imitates the visual neatness of a well-organized shelf. The act of arranging icons, creating folders, or pinning shortcuts is not unlike tidying a desk or placing books in order. In this way, the human need to categorize and access remains the same, even as the shelf goes virtual.
Online shopping, endless cell without walls.
E-commerce platforms replicate the shelf on a vast scale. Each product listing, with its image, description, and price, is a kind of digital item on display. Search filters and categories function like labeled aisles. Wish lists act like saved ledges, where items rest until we decide their fate. Unlike physical shelves, digital ones are infinitely scalable. They never run out of space. They don't sag under weight. And yet, their design still borrows from traditional shelving logic. Rows, columns, grids. Icons arranged to mimic store shelves and library stacks. Even in the digital world, we still want to browse, to look across, just as we do with real shelves. Cloud storage, the invisible archive. Beyond what we see on screens, digital shelves extend into cloud servers and data centers. Documents, photos, and backups live in structured folders, behind layers of interface. These are shelves for files, quietly holding work and memory in distant servers. Some are automatically sorted. Others are messily named and vaguely organized, like a cluttered closet, forgotten but full. The act of uploading, bookmarking, or organizing a digital folder is modern shelving. Only now, the shelf floats, untethered by gravity or geography. It is everywhere and nowhere. Yet it still serves the same purpose: to hold things until we need them. A world without shelves. What if they disappeared? Imagine a quiet morning. You rise, stretch, and reach for a book. But there is no shelf. You open your closet, and your shoes, bags, and boxes lie in a tangled heap on the floor. The kitchen counters are cluttered. The pantry is a mess. The tools in the garage are scattered like leaves in wind. What would life look like without shelves? It's a thought so subtle, most never consider it. But the absence of the shelf would reshape not only homes and shops, but habits, behaviors, and even the pace of daily life. In the home, chaos without order. In every room of a home, the shelf does quiet work. Without it, we would find no elevated place for spices, toiletries, shoes, or towels. Closets would lose their tiers. Pantries would become pits of unstackable goods. Even bedside tables, mini shelves in their own right, would vanish. Flat surfaces would overflow. Floors would bear the burden. Storage would become horizontal, not vertical, and profoundly inefficient. We'd be forced to stack or hide or hang. But we'd lose the ability to display and reach with ease. Even the rituals of placement, putting down a key, setting a book, propping up a photo, would become small inconveniences. Life would tilt slightly out of balance. In the public sphere, a disruption of systems. Without shelves, stores would be unrecognizable. Libraries would lose their order. Shops would become floor displays only. Warehouses would bloat sideways. Grocery aisles, gone. Bookstores, dismantled.
Retail windows. Bara.
Logistics would slow. Inventory would suffer. Items would take up more space, yet be harder to find. In hospitals, schools, factories, and museums, the absence of shelves would disrupt everything from medicine storage to archival preservation. The efficiency, elegance, and quiet support that shelves provide would be sorely missed. In the mind, lost anchors of memory. Beyond function, shelves also serve a psychological purpose. They let us see our things, our stories, ourselves, at a glance. Without shelves, our mementos and milestones would be hidden in boxes. Out of sight, out of mind. We might forget that old photo, or never glance at the spine of a favorite book, or lose touch with our own journey, simply because it wasn't visible anymore. Shelves remind us, gently, of who we were and what we've gathered. Without them, memory becomes harder to reach. Even nostalgia has nowhere to perch. To imagine a world without shelves is to recognize how deeply they serve us. Not loudly, not proudly, but steadily. In every room, every hallway, every part of life. A gentle reflection, why shelves still matter. At the end of our quiet journey through time, from stone niches to digital displays, one truth becomes softly clear. The shelf still matters. It may not be loud. It does not move. It does not shine or speak. But it serves. Whether in a kitchen, a library, a store, or a server room, the shelf holds things. And in doing so, it holds space. For people, for memories, for daily life. Timeless simplicity. The design of a shelf is ancient and unchanged. A horizontal surface. A place to place things. That's all. And yet, it is enough. It simplifies our surroundings. It lifts what would otherwise clutter. It lets us see what we have, and reach what we need. This quiet function, of making life a little more orderly, has never gone out of style. From pharaohs to factories, from monks to modern lofts, people have always sought the stillness that shelves bring. Beyond storage, a feeling of home. A shelf is more than furniture. It is part of what makes a space feel lived in. A photo frame on a wall shelf. Spices lined neatly in a kitchen. Books stacked by the bed. Mementos from travels. Souvenirs from time. All these say, someone lives here. Someone cared enough to place these things here. Shelves are the stage where objects become stories. They create pause. They invite reflection. They say, here is something to notice. Universality in form. Across cultures and centuries. From ancient palaces to mud brick huts, shelves have quietly done the same work. They transcend language. They ignore trends. They simply hold. And in that simple act, they bring us closer to order, calm, and familiarity. In a way, every shelf is the same. And yet each one is deeply personal. A child's bedroom shelf, filled with toys and drawings. A scholar's study, lined with dog-eared books. A tiny kitchen ledge, bearing salt and a cup. The shelf, in its stillness, reflects the rhythm of daily life. Always steady, always present. Holding space for the future. Even as we move into digital worlds. And virtual shelves multiply across screens. The spirit of the shelf remains. It reminds us that placement matters. that the act of organizing is a kind of care, that what we choose to display says something about who we are, in homes, in hearts, in history. The shelf still holds, and perhaps it always will.